Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics, ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It's the week of November 28th, the first Sunday in Advent, my favorite time of year. The Irish are 11-1, having defeated the Cardinal of Stanford University. Everyone still may or may not be hungover from turkey, or maybe Fireball if you were tailgating this weekend. And college football is at the height of its excitement as we wait with anticipation for the college football playoff standings. But it's the season of Advent, which is a time of waiting and anticipation. So the college football playoff final standings fits in perfectly with that. And this is my favorite time of year. But how are you? Tell me about your Thanksgiving and your weekend.
Okay. So I know that you love Advent, Haley. I don't know that I knew it was your favorite time of year. So when you say that, you mean like literally time of year, like this month of December, or like the church season? So I want to get back to that, but just to give an outline for what we're going to talk about today, we'll talk about your favorite time of year. Yeah, I'll talk about my experience at the Notre Dame Stanford game on their campus and just a short little message on mascots. I want to ask a question for you and our audience about decorations, which I know is a big tradition in your home, but also in the church. We'll talk about the Sunday's gospel, the first Sunday in Advent, and maybe a resource if people are not familiar with Sacred Spaces of Notre Dame, a great way to prepare for Advent. So, okay, before we talk about that game, which I contend was a great win, but not a great game. So I'll make a distinction about that in a minute, Haley. It's your favorite time of year. So it's the most wonderful time of year is what the lyrics say, right? But Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you ask, is it my favorite time of year or my favorite time of the liturgical year? So I guess in some ways it's both. I love this time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I love Advent. I think in many ways, and this would tie into it being, my favorite part of the liturgical year, Advent was the one time in my childhood, kind of in my upbringing, where religion slash faith slash Christianity was actually brought into our home and not just time we spent in church on Sundays. So we went to church growing up, but we went to church. That was really it. But my mom, years ago, before, when I was young and I don't remember, put together what she called a children's or a family Advent program to be done in the home. So we did that. It's a reading, it's a song we sing, it's explaining what the candles mean. It's the theme for the week, which of course is hope, on this first Advent Sunday. And so in that sense, until I joined the Catholic Church, I don't think I knew that this was the beginning of the liturgical year. I didn't even realize, I think, that the church had a liturgical year or a season in that sense. But for me, Advent was just a very, just kind of a nice faith-filled feeling, I would say. I don't think I actually knew that it was, I don't think I knew I loved it because faith was being brought into our home. But it was a really neat time in my upbringing, was celebrating Advent. That was a huge part of my childhood. Again, not being raised by Catholic parents. Other people, I know other religions, other Christian religions celebrate Advent as well. But so I guess it's both. But I don't think I knew that it was my favorite liturgical part of the year. But it is definitely my favorite part of the calendar year.
Yeah. Well, it spawns for me the question then, what a great realization, and just what you're naming, like in what ways is faith brought into our homes? And I think that's a really good question for families, for a married couple, for parents, right? Because you're talking about, the way you experience faith, right, is this expression of communal worship. But then some of these traditions, that's really cool. So
yeah, and I will say that is, we're all evolving in our faith. We're all still growing. We're all at different places at different times in our life. But I also remember, it's one of the reasons I love my nativity so much. And we can talk about that as well, or maybe we'll save that for another week. But I had when I was a young mom, when my kids were young, I was part of a mother's Bible group at our church when we first got married or when I first had James. And that was all new to me too, right? Was kind of this moms group, but it was the only
Yeah.
moms group I could find and it happened to be at my church. And I remember very specifically one of the moms saying in one of our discussions, when someone walks into your house, how long does it take them to realize you're a Christian household, right? Or you're Catholic? You walk into our home, and of course, for many of us who are Notre Dame alums, you see Notre Dame stuff, or even that's outside if it's a flag, or so we share so much of what we value outwardly in how we present ourselves or our homes.
Yeah.
And so I've always really thought about that.
Yeah.
It would, I mean, and I've always made therefore a conscious effort for people to know when they walk into our home, we are a Christian household. Not for any
Yep.
other reason, and not that there's one religion that's, better than another, or I'm Christian and you're not. But it's just if that's important to me, my home should reflect that. So I guess I feel that way about faith as well. If we're just living out our faith on Sundays, it's not really that important to us then.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And yeah, it needs to, I guess what I'm hearing you say is, what's like Ignatius of Loyola always says, love shows itself in deeds, right? Like it's an active verb, and
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like faith is too. And it's not just, our works of, mercy or, giving to those in need or prayer, but it also like shows itself in art or right in the celebration of, yeah, timely. I don't know, I'm just thinking about this Advent season and the signs of it. They're literally signs with the Advent wreath, right? And the manger without the Christ child in it. So I think it's a great question for us to consider this Advent. What are the ways that faith is brought into our homes? So maybe this Advent, that could be something that we all, maybe be intentional about. Just as a side, note in response to this is my question for you and our listeners. So I went to my St. Vincent de Paul this morning, first Sunday in Advent, and the wreath was out, and so was 2 Christmas trees and an altar full of poinsettias. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And the manger was there, the creche, and again, the Christ child was not there. I was shocked, Haley, because usually it's plain until Christmas Day and there's that marking. And it was covered in poinsettias. And I don't know, I felt like this is the one place that has not, bought into the commercial pre-season of Christmas. And you could say that's old school and that's, not the way it should be. But I did appreciate that the presider actually addressed the issue. So he preached on, the gospel, which we'll talk about in our spiritual stew. But he said, I want to thank the Ladies Guild for the beauty they've extended to this church with the poinsettias and the trees. And he said, the world celebrates Christmas, obviously now until, and almost like Christmas ends December 25th. He said, but that's not how it is in the church. It starts on December 25th, right? And so we're just trying to meet in the middle. And I thought, oh, okay, we're enjoying the beauty of the Christmas season. But my mom's like, you've got to let that go and just don't be so stodgy. But I don't know. I kind of want, if Advent means coming and anticipation, like what am I, other than I get it. I'm obviously anticipating the birth of our Lord, but it's like those signs or those ways that faith is, expressed or, symbols and sacraments, like I need them in due time. I don't know. Am I being too stodgy?
No, you're just being with what you know and you've been comfortable
Yeah.
with, right? So,
Yeah.
of course, we have our tradition where we decorate for Christmas on Thanksgiving night. And that stems from a story I've told many times 20 years ago. 20 years ago on Thanksgiving, I was very, very pregnant with my first son. And I said to my husband, if we're decorating for Christmas, we're doing it tonight or it's not going to happen. And so we did. We decorated for Christmas the night of Thanksgiving after we had eaten and cleared all the dishes and put everything away. And we've done that every year since then. It's just kind of our thing. And In some ways, I love it from just a practical, non-religious or anything standpoint. It means that after we eat, we're not sitting down and taking a nap on the couch or, laying around the rest of the night. We're active. We're up and down the stairs a million times, lugging the bins and being very active. So I've actually really appreciated that part of it. I loved it when our kids were younger because they would go to bed and it was Thanksgiving and they would wake up the next morning and it was magically Christmas. So I love that part of it too. But what I'm hearing you saying is that you probably aren't decorated for Christmas in your home right now. I love that decorations for me, whether it's Christmas lights, whether it's poinsettias. Interestingly enough, our church isn't decorated, and I didn't note that today. So clearly that's the norm. I probably would have noticed had it been, but I don't know if it would have bothered me because for me, the Christmas season has begun. And for me, that is the decorations and the celebration of it. Now, maybe that's me being too commercialized. But, again, it's one of the reasons I'm very intentional with all my nativities. I make sure that every single room in our house has at least one nativity. And again, I guess that's maybe my way of justifying, yes, I'm being very decorative with this celebration, but I'm going to make sure that we're also recognizing and honoring what this season means.
So is the Christ child in your nativity scene?
Well, so with some of them, he's attached. So you're either putting out the manger or you're not putting it out.
You got to go no manger.
All.
You got to.
Yeah, you just have to. So that, again, that is not how I was raised. So we always had a creche growing up, and we actually had two. There was one in our living room that we were not allowed to touch. That was like my mom's. And then we had one that we could play with. And so I played like a dollhouse with this children's nativity set all month of August or all month of December. And so part of that was telling the story of the nativity and then, of course, having baby Jesus there. So again, it wasn't until I was an adult and converted to Catholicism, went to church and realized baby Jesus doesn't show up till Christmas. Baby Jesus for me was always around during Advent.
Baby Jesus. Yep.
So, again, that's just part of how I was raised. Does that make it right? No.
Yeah.
That's just kind of where we are. But I will say, when I put out all those nativity scenes, and some of them are one piece together, right? So it's like a hand carved, one piece of wood that's carved that is, the stable and Mary and Joseph and Jesus it's all connected. So I would have to not put that whole piece out. But the pieces where you could put baby Jesus there, I paused and I thought, do we not put him out? And I thought, well, I'm putting him out.
Yeah. I know, because other than for you, right? I think in the church, it's like
absolutely.
Again, it's a bit for your home. So it's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. It's
but for some people it might be, and I respect that too. Yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm sure people would be appalled by, me playing with baby Jesus when I was a child, but that was Advent and our faith in the home, and I loved it. That was important to me.
So this weekend is always a big weekend on the West Coast for Notre Dame fans. The Irish are always either in Palo Alto against Stanford or USC in Southern California. So they get a West Coast visit. Usually they're trying to recruit, and it's great because, for those of us out here in that, Pacific time zone, sometimes we feel a little left out. So last night was the final home game with Stanford's senior game, which I love that tradition. We've talked a little bit about that. And Notre Dame won 45-14. And, it just wasn't an exciting game. So I do make that distinction. It was a great win, but was it a great game? Part of me says a great game is when both teams equally compete and push each other to be better and, reach for more. So that's my personal bias on that. But it was interesting because the game was at 5 and where my tailgate was with a bunch of friends, friend from 2 years ahead of me and his sister kind of host it. And a bunch of us come together. kind of the marker, like anyone who tailgates, it's kind of like, what are the things that you can point to for people walking by? So it's flagpole with US flag, and underneath it was a flag with an Indian, an American Indian. And I looked at it and I thought, that's interesting, because the American Indian depicted on this flag is the Indian that was the Stanford mascot up until the 70s. So today, Stanford is known as the Stanford Cardinal. So they don't actually have a mascot in the sense of mascot means like pet or toy almost. Like that's kind of how they came to be, so to speak. They're just represented by the color cardinal red, because in the 70s, some Native American students had said, we don't want to be represented this way. So it had changed. And they had actually had a student who had played the role of this American Stanford Indian, so to speak, for many years. So I just thought it was interesting that was the flag. And then also for clarification, Stanford has this tree, which has been voted the worst mascot one of the worst mascots in all of sports. But the tree is actually the mascot for the band. And the band is like, they're just so.
They're just the Stanford band. If you either know, you know, and if you don't, you can find out. I don't. Yeah,
right.
They're themselves.
Yes. So I just thought that was an interesting choice, because I don't know. I just was surprised that that's what they chose as the flag in a time where, we are trying to, change and make things more appropriate and, culturally sensitive and whatnot. And mascots, to me, the whole thing is just super interesting. The choices that we make. Because, for example, some teams, like the New York Yankees, they don't have a mascot. They just are the Yankees. Like, that's it. You don't see a Yankee dressed up. They have a team name. That's where it ends. Right. And Stanford has this color, which is kind of like go Cardinal, not Cardinals. So it's just an interesting expression. And again, these people express themselves through that. And I thought, okay.
That it's super interesting. First of all, I didn't know that the tree was just the mascot for the band. So right. I didn't know that. I knew there was a tree involved. Didn't know it was just for the band. I did know about the cardinal.
Tree too, by the way.
Yeah. I did know the cardinal, not cardinals. And but I didn't know that they used to be the Indians. That sounds vaguely familiar, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you that. What I do think could be happening is, and of course I live in the world on the East Coast of the Washington football team. That's a big discussion, hot topic across the country and in the NFL, but certainly where I am here, where you have a number of Washington football team fans, right, who are still wearing their former Redskins gear. So that's been a topic of frequent conversation in the circles here. But, one thing I think could be happening is because we are moving towards in the right direction, in a direction I agree with, being more culturally sensitive. There is this backlash of people who then go the other direction, right? Mm-hmm. So those fans who hung that, who even made that flag, I don't know if it's an original flag from the 70s.
I know.
Yeah. Or if it's, a new version of it that came back up. It very well could be someone who, let's say 10 years ago, didn't really care that Stanford used to be the Indians and now they're the Cardinal. But because we are moving in one direction and people are therefore running the other direction as fast as they can, maybe ran quickly to go get that Indian flag because it's just the popular thing to do. And it's exhausting sometimes, but it's interesting, and of course, when all of these topics come up, people bring up the Fighting Irish. And, I love Notre Dame just takes this stance of, really educating people on where that came from and what it means and who we are. And, that it's not in any way intended to be derogatory, nor do people take it that way. But that is interesting,
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I
Stanford
mean,
did
with
that.
a group of students who said we're going to use it against people who've been prejudiced toward us. So they were saying they made fun of the Irish and they said, we are the Fighting Irish. And they like literally used it as they turned it on itself.
Right. Like a
while they're being
rallying
made fun
cry.
of, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So point of pride. And so that would be different if this, the student body at Stanford who were Indians were like, no, this is empowering us, and it's always a question of like who decides, right? So
Right.
but I don't know if the average person, the only reason I recognized this Indian, because again, this was in the 50s, no, in the 70s, so the mid 70s. Obviously some Stanford people would recognize it, but that's 40 plus years ago.
Right.
So I only knew about it because I teach about it. So I was like, oh my gosh, there it is. That's just so interesting. So part of sports culture and lore, but always fun to host, always fun to have people out, and always fun to see a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like the colliding of your two worlds, right? You have your Notre Dame world and your daily world, and those are always fun when they come together. So I'm glad you had a great weekend. I'm glad Notre Dame got the win, of course. We are in the midst of this crazy college football playoff rankings, and we'll just have to kind of see what happens. There's always a lot of talk about that, but it more than anything, as much as we love football, it is Advent, and I love Advent more. I really do. So one of the things that you had mentioned, Anne, is this program called Sacred Spaces that Notre Dame does, and I think this is the third year they've done it.
Yes.
I don't think it's the fourth. I think it's the third.
You're right.
And even last year, I remember thinking, oh gosh, are they going to run out of places to show? And they haven't. And then, even starting today, they came up with, kind of some neat places. So if you Google Notre Dame Sacred Spaces, it's something you can subscribe to. It gets emailed or texted to you every day. I loved, today was the first one, and it was particularly kind of fun and meaningful for me. It was Father Pete McCormick, who lives in Bomber Hall, which is the dorm my son lives in. And he, the Bomber Hall was shown in it. He talks about the fields that are right there, the bookstore basketball courts. Again, any place that's at Notre Dame can kind of seem like home, but, for the past year and a half, that has been my son's home. So it was kind of fun to hear and see, but a really great series, just a different take on Advent, which I love. It's creative, it's clever, it's meaningful. It's not just the daily gospel reflection, which I love and appreciate as well. But it gives a nice visual to people who can't get to campus as well. But today's gospel, I think we both found spoke to us. So I'll let you kick that off and we can talk about the gospel.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, it prompts a number of questions, from Luke. The message is, be vigilant at all times and pray that you have the strength to escape the tribulations that are imminent and to stand before the Son of Man. Constant reminders to pay attention, stay awake, be alert, right? And this is really going to be a theme in Advent, is this, again, pay attention, be alert, take note, take heed. And, it's speaking to our lives and how we live our lives. And, for me, it's just a couple of thoughts. There's just been a lot of different things. For example, in the Bay Area, we've had just some syndicated group robberies, looting. So for example, in Walnut Creek, where I grew up, 80 people ran into Nordstrom, crowbars, ski masks, goggles, stole like $40,000 of stuff. Wow. Louis Vuitton in San Francisco, 8 people looting a store. San Jose, Hayward, again, all these rash, but organized robberies. So nobody feels safe, right? That's what that causes, a lot of fear. And then St. Francis, our football team was in a football game, CCS finals on Friday night. 2 minutes, 48 seconds left in the game, gunshots outside of the stadium. Now, we were at a neutral site, we were not at St. Francis. We would have been the host because we were the higher seed in Campbell, California. I mean, Campbell is a nice, suburb, but gunshots to the point where students, like players, ran to an end zone. Other students were lying down, and you see that, and you're just like, come on, a lot of fear. You just can't take anything for granted. So I'm always cognizant of the fact of like, one of the titles for Christ is Redeemer. And we're celebrating, him, the incarnation, like God's become flesh among us, and the role in redemption, redeeming the world. And it's like, but if things are great, like you don't really need a redeemer. Like what's the need for redemption if things are perfect? And we are constantly reminded. I mean, I feel that way, but I acutely feel that way with the sense of fear that the world is in need of redemption. I don't want to say the words now more than ever because I think it's always been true, but these are times where it just feels, and to go that direction, it feels more life-giving to say, okay, I have to lean into Christ. I have to turn towards Christ as my Redeemer because we can't do this. I mean, obviously we need safety, we need police officers, FBI, people working, but it's like, this is organized. This is not a one-off. This is big.
Yeah, that's so I actually read about the Nordstrom in Walnut Creek, and maybe I had seen other ones as well, but I took note of that in particular because I didn't have Nordstrom growing up in Arizona, and that was my mom's favorite department store. So I would swim at a meet called Far Westerns when I was younger, and it was oftentimes in Walnut Creek. And we would go shop. That was like my big trip once a year when I would go to this meet, and we would shop at Nordstrom in Walnut Creek. And I remember when I read about that a couple weeks ago, thinking that is a nice area. That's an upscale area. That's not a place one would think might have that type of crime. But to hear what you're saying, that this is pervasive, that it's happening, that wasn't, an isolated interest or incident, that's terrifying. That is fearful.
Southern California too, apparently. Yeah. The cars are stolen. Yeah. And they go in and, there's things that, Haley, part of me is like, is it because there's a resale market out there? So they ran into San Rafael, they went into the Apple store. I mean, you can resell those products. Like you can resell the Louis Vuitton purse on eBay or on the Real. I mean, there's a market for all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that also is where I get down because I ask myself this question all the time. And it's not necessarily like right here in the gospel, but it's like, do I put my security in money or do we put it in the Lord? And every person has to ask themselves, where do they put their security? Because it might not just be in money, it could be in fame, right? But it's like our security comes from God alone. But money is certainly one of the big draws in our culture.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. It's also interesting to me, we read and hear the gospel through the lens of where we are in our lives, right? So you heard today's gospel and, you read it and hear it through the lens of this fear that's going on in your community right now. I heard it a little different. And, again, one's not right or wrong. For me, I think it's just fascinating hearing what you took from it and what I did. For me, it's more of that reminder to just be present, to be aware, to be in the moment, to really look and find, God, Jesus, however we want to view it, as opposed to getting caught up in all of the minutia and the craziness of the season. So I'm moving into this month of anticipation, this season of Advent, trying to be mindful and very aware that I can get caught up in, I have already started making my Christmas card list, and I know I'm making checklists of everything I need to do, and I've gone through my gift closet to see what I've bought all year and what do I still need to buy. I am very aware that I can get caught up in that. And it's all very lovely and it's all, a meaningful part of the season. But I hear this gospel and I think, okay, I need to strip it down to the basics and just be present,
Mm.
and be prepared, right? Be vigilant at all times. Be aware, that, Jesus could show up at any moment. And am I going to see him, right? Because,
Mhm.
it's just like miracles, right? God is everywhere. We just have to open our eyes to see his presence in our lives. Um, so for me, that's what I'm hearing is I need to just take a moment every day and make sure, beyond watching sacred spaces and beyond, reading the gospel in the morning and the reflection, throughout the day, I need to be vigilant at all times that this is really a time of reflection and anticipation of really this greatest gift that we've received as Christians.
Yeah, no, it is. It's something I don't know that we can hear it enough. I think because I think it's a hard message. It is easy, it's so easy to get distracted. And in my blog today, I was writing about Gabe Kapler, the manager for the Giants, and I think distraction is the enemy of excellence. Like it's just the truth. So to live our best selves, to be our best selves, like I think we need to be present and in relationship with others and aware. And I think that's our best selves, but it can be very hard. So um Advent's maybe the season to just slow down. And they said the coming could be, do we live with this season of coming with anticipation, or do we live with fear? And it's probably both for many of us. But um anything that's coming, there's almost like a rightful fear. Like I'm sure when you were pregnant with your first, like there should be a little bit of fear, probably. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
overwhelming, right? Task at hand, or I don't know. Doesn't have to paralyze us, though.
No,
Yeah.
no, it does
You know,
not have to
you're that-
paralyze us.
Yeah, excuse me.
And that,
So,
that is actually something I think about this a lot in a very basic practical standpoint, right? We are anticipating the birth of Jesus. That we all know that. That's something to celebrate. It's a a reverent time. It's a holy time. Should we fear that? The one side of my brain says no, right? This is not something to be fearful of. This is something to really look forward to and celebrate. On the flip side, if God or Jesus showed up in my room right now, you could bet I would be scared, right? Like
yeah.
the actual physical presence of God showing up in front of us. I think it'd scare the bejeebus out of me. So would I be fearful? Yes, I might be fearful. But I don't think we should live our lives being
Yeah.
fearful. It would be the
Yeah.
most
But
amazing
here's a
thing.
question, not about the word, but Jesus. Then I'm like, I wonder what the roots of that word is. But like, I don't know. Like, part of me says, like, if I really am going to follow Jesus, like, no, like my false security in money, in whatever safety, like to really be a Christian, to really live as Jesus told us. I do think I think it's scary. It means denying yourself. It means taking up your cross, like to, and ultimately to give it to God, your Redeemer. But I don't know. Part of me is just like, that is that is a real challenge. And I think, the last few months I've been thinking about, life and what brings real joy. And I think, what our world tells us brings joy. I do find a conflict between what my faith tells me joy, where I will find joy, and what our culture tells us. And I'm trying to like navigate both somehow. But if I lean towards Christ, I think I'll be happier, but I think it might be harder. I don't know.
I'm sure it would be harder. But I
Yeah.
also really and then the Bible tells us this in so many places, probably more so in the Old Testament, but there is this sense of fearing God.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
don't get the
It's the
sense,
Holy Spirit. Yeah.
and maybe this is, why Jesus was born and why he was sent, right? I don't get the sense, or maybe I just don't want to have this sense, or maybe it's what I'm choosing to see or believe. I don't believe that God truly wants us to live in fear.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
So that's clearly a man-made emotion.
Yeah.
As everything is, right? Even what we read in the Bible, it's written by men. So, that's all an interpretation that a man has had, or human, but man. But I don't think they want,
Yeah.
God
Be
would
not
want us to live
afraid,
in fear.
right? That's the message
Yeah.
from the angel, right? That's the
Do
message
not
of
be
David.
afraid. Right.
Yeah, be not afraid. I mean, really. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
But those are
It's
all our emotions, right? We have our own conflict.
yeah. Well, I
But
think that's why we can't do it alone. I mean, I think we need others because God has no hands but our hands, and that's part of it. It's like the fears might be real, but other people can help us, and yeah, I hope.
yeah, no, definitely. So, my takeaway for the week, well, I think we both need to look up, it came out of my mouth without even thinking about it, but Jesus. So let's look into that and see where that came from. I might be afraid to know what I just said. But I am really going to try to, I'm going to try to slow down and be present this week. And,
Yeah.
in all of the decorations that I see in my home as I'm driving around, I am, if I could put Christmas lights up in every room, I would. I love Christmas lights. But what I need to see are the lights as Jesus is the light of the world and not just pretty Christmas lights. So
right.
that's going to be my
Mhm.
challenge for this week, is to see the faith and the goodness in the commercial parts of this holiday we are about to celebrate.
Yeah. And I'm going to spend a little time. So one, I love the slow down. That was an episode, I think it was maybe 2 episodes ago. Slow down or you will be slowed down, right?
Yes.
That was part of our conversation. So I think that's a
Yes.
great reminder. I'm going to sit with the question that you raised, kind of what are the ways that faith is brought into our home? Maybe consider what that means. And then I will be spending this week thinking about the life of Jesuit priest, Father Tony Sauer. He was the president of St. Ignatius for many years. He is really the person who hired me. He died and he was 86 years old. And I'm telling you, Haley, and I'll blog about him, but I would take a bullet for him, but I wouldn't need to, because there were so many people that would have done it for me or whoever. Those people, beloved. And why was he beloved? Totally generous. So for example, you'd say, hey, James is going to be confirmed this Saturday. Our parish is short on help. He'd open up his pocket calendar and he'd be like, what time is it at? 2:00? I'll be there. Totally availed himself. Was an incredible letter writer. Always wrote letters to faculty, family members, really the ministry of letter writing. But for me personally, before I got hired, I wasn't sure if I was going to get the job. And the principal said, yeah, I don't think it's going to work out. Apply next year. We think you're great. And Tony says, Anne, don't lose hope. Don't ever lose hope. And honestly, a weird confluence of events occurred and I got the job. And that changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, really. So what a great message to give somebody, don't lose hope. Don't ever lose hope. Right.
Yes.
So I would like to just this week think about his legacy and the lessons that I learned from Father Tony. So,
well, and to take his generosity of spirit and channel it.
Yeah. Availing yourself to others in that way.
That's huge.
Literally, it is so huge.
It's huge.
It's very hard to do.
Yeah.
Right.
So we wish our Jewish friends a happy Hanukkah. It's early this year. Yes.
Right, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's first night of Hanukkah. We wish our Christian friends a blessed first Advent Sunday. It is the Sunday of hope. And what a great message that, Father Tony shared, a perfect one to share on this first Sunday of Advent.
Really the message of the Sunday?
Well, there's a theme for each week in Advent. Yeah. And today is hope.
That's so perfect.
Yes. Yeah. So, Anne, have a great week. I wish you peace and presence, and presence not with a T, but presence.
I know, but in due time for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I look forward to connecting next week.
I do too. Thanks, Haley.
Thanks, Anne.